In this video, we're going to talk about power spikes, what they are, and how you can use them to your advantage throughout the game. They're a key element when looking at team compositions as they give you timings for actions that your champions can perform. And they can be anything from level advantages, items, blue, red, dragon, baron buff, and perhaps even summoner spells. And these power spikes are going to be crucial in determining whether or not you can win certain fights or prolong laning phases and things like that. Now, it's a lot easier by just giving examples, so we're going to do that. Now, the most common ones you see nowadays is going to be the Trinity Force on Corki. So Corki getting Trinity Force gives him a lot of sieging potential with good poke, sustain. He's a little bit more mobile. Can use that Sheen proc, the Trinity proc onto the towers, get quite a bit of damage. So he has a good power spike once he finishes his Trinity Force to group and force down objectives, which would be the most common one, the mid lane tower. So a lot of times you see Corkies just finish the Trinity, push out their bot lane wave, and then go group middle. That's using their power spike. Then you have another one, which is another example that doesn't come from items, which is coming from blue buff, Xerath with blue buff. You give Xerath blue, and you, again, just like Corki, you want to have more people in your mid lane to focus down those towers and just make sure that you get extended poke. You can defend sieges much better, and you have the blue buff regen to prolong yours if you don't get the mid lane tower within a couple of waves. So that's another one where you want to use your power spike of blue buff to group up and take an objective. Then you have another one which is a little bit less common, which would be Vlad hitting level 9. Now, everybody knows that Vlad is one of the strongest laners. Once he hits level 9, that means that his Q cooldown is reduced to the final form, and it's very low cooldown. It's less than 2 seconds, I think. And that gives him a lot of laning potential, and bully lane potential. And you don't want to find yourself grouping, say, Vlad versus Rumble at level 9. You're like, okay, Vlad has a short cooldown on Q, let's go group. That's not very useful. What you want to do at that point is going to use Vlad's laning strength to prolong that laning phase and have him stay in lane and bully whoever he's laning against for him to get a nice advantage via his level 9 power spike. So unlike the other ones that we mentioned, the Xerath and the Corki, you're going to want to use this one to prolong the laning phase. Then another one is going to be the Rumble at Dragon. Rumble is an excellent team fighter, especially when it comes down to chokes. A good equalizer can cook up an entire team. And if you got a Rumble that has Sork Shoes and Haunting Guys, which is a really early timing, by the way, it could be like 15 minutes perhaps, you don't want to force a team fight necessarily at Dragon if Rumble has the ability to enter that fight because you know how strong he is at that time. So it would be unwise to take that fight. And as for the Rumble player, you want to take that fight. So you want to push out your lane. You want somebody to help you if you need help pushing that lane and group up and use your power spike to take that objective for nearly free because fighting against the Rumble with those items early on can be very risky. Then we have another one which is going to be focused on levels, which is Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix is a really obvious example. Now this can work for many other champions, but Kha'Zix once he hits level 11 gets 2 evolutions. So you can have the leap and the Q, which does the isolated damage for ridiculous amounts. You don't want to be forcing a team fight or an objective when the guy is level 10 and like missing half a bar of XP for level 11 because that would put you in a really shitty situation because he won't have the resets, he's not going to be nearly as strong, and there might be some people that are level 11 in the fight, and champions like Wukong perhaps that when they hit level 11 their ulti they don't really get anything else, but their ultimate, since the ratios are so ridiculously good, the damage from his R just goes through the roof. It's an insane value. It goes from like 70 damage to 400, something like that. It is a lot of damage. So those are champions that you want to use at level 11 power spike really to your advantage. So should avoid those team fights when the guys are low level. Perhaps give them a little bit of solo lane farm before the fight happens if you really want to take it so that they can be higher level and be successful in those fights. And onto items again. I just want to give you guys as many examples so that you can understand what these power spikes are and can see them for yourself and see what timings you should be using and what timings you should not. And then we have the slow item build, which this one can go into the laning phase as well. So for instance, bottom lane Ezreals or mid lane Ezreals a lot of times find themselves buying Tear as their first item. Tear is mana and mana regen. Mana regen and mana are not combat stats because these champions are not Kassadin. So they have zero combat stats at that point and are very weak, which makes their laning becomes weaker. So taking trades in lane can be more difficult. So they're in a power trough. They're weaker at that point. So they have to avoid combat as how it was before when it was just Doran's Blade versus Doran's Blade. Now it's like pickaxe to tier. It's not a very good matchup. Same goes with taking fights at the Dragon Pit. Like you don't want to take a fight at Dragon Pit when your team has tiers stacking. Let's say you got a mid lane Jace with tier, and your top lane Maokai that's building his row. You just completed it, and you're like, all right, let's go, guys. Let's take the team fight. We got the mirror mana that's not fully completed. We got the row that's not fully stacked. Let's go. That's not a fight to take. You want to take the fight once your items are completed, so that you have the stats that you paid for. At the moment, you paid for all the stats, but they aren't there because they're not growing. Those items need time. So you're going to want to avoid those fights just because of the nature of the items. And that can be a very common mistake. But nowadays, it shouldn't be because you even have a nice little stack counter on your row telling you how much it is. Same goes for the tier. You can actually hover over your tier. You can see that how many tiers out of 750 do you have. Well, once you hit that one with your mirror mana fully stacked and you got the single target damage factor to it, now you're stronger than you were before. You want to take a fight at that point. The next one that you're going to want to use is going to be split pushing. Let's say your mid lane is a Zed. Now, Zed, let's say you got Zed to get a solo kill. He was ganked for and received the kill. And now he's going to have an early work timing. Now, instead of prolonging the bottom lane, the laning phase in bottom lane, a good idea would be to say, this Zed is getting pretty far ahead. He will have an early Blade of the Ruined King. It would be wise to focus tower damage in the bottom lane so that we can take the bottom lane tower and have the bottom lane rotate into the mid lane. So now forcing the other bottom lane to rotate middle. Now it's 2v2 in mid lane because you have to defend the mid lane tower or else it's going to get pushed down continuously. And now you have the Zed with an early Blade of the Ruined King, split pushing bottom lane in a much longer lane. So anybody that comes to 1v1 him will more than likely die just because now they don't have a tier 1 turret to fall back on. They have to go all the way back to the tier 2. So now the Zed is able to create a monumental amount of pressure just because you took down that tower and allowed him to do that. If you don't take that tower down, then bottom lane can kind of stay there, 2v1 him safely. It's not really a risk of any collapse on mid lane. Zed can really rotate. Invading objectives can be a lot tougher. So that's timing that you want to be using and look to in the future to make use of it. Now, what you want to do is use these power spikes to your advantage when you want to play out your team comp and avoid the enemy's power spike. So it's a tug of war, if you will. Like, okay, we're strong now, fight here. Okay, we're not strong now, don't fight there. And let's say as to how to avoid them, you have an Aurelia versus a Rumble matchup. Rumble, a fantastic team fighter, as we mentioned before, but Aurelia, a much better split pusher. You know, she can put a lot of 1v1 pressure, and it can be quite difficult to gank at times. If you want to force a team fight a dragon, if you're the team that has the Aurelia, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where the Aurelia, I completely lost the train. Anyways, you want to have the Aurelia shut down the Rumble because even though you're against a Rumble, you don't want to be using the Dragon as just, oh, we can't touch Dragon because they have a Rumble. Rumble will kill a solid Dragon. That's not how the champion works. What you can do as the Aurelia team is keep the Rumble in his tower. So putting early pressure into the Aurelia lane to set her ahead of Rumble will mean that as the laning phase progresses, Aurelia should be able to keep Rumble at his tower which will mean that any team fight that happens in a dragon pit where it's forced will more than likely just be a 4-on-4 without the top laners. So now Irelia is using her strength, which is a 1v1, and Rumble is not. He's not team fighting. Now Rumble, maybe he's able to find a way to teleport down and take the dragon fight. That's fine. If your team can disengage from that safely, now you simply happen to take a top lane tower for a teleport and the dragon. That's a pretty nice trade, to be honest, because now when Rumble comes back top, he becomes even weaker in the laning phase, which is now Aurelia's strength, and you can perhaps push down the tier 2 tower with a little bit of help. Now, I don't want you guys to take this to the extreme where it's, no, we can't fight right now. I need level 11. Or, no, we can't fight right now. I need Trinity. I absolutely must complete Trinity. It's terrible if we don't fight right now. If we fight right now, I need to get this item. That's kind of right, but abusing it to that extent where you have to do these levels is not. You need to be flow like water and see how the game unfolds, and then determine, is it really going to be bad if we fight it right now? I mean, the fight looks good, but do I really need the Trinity to make a difference? Do I really need to farm an extra jungle clear to see if I hit one more level? So still be on the lookout and really judge for yourself, but try to play around these power spikes and you'll find a lot more success, especially with the item ones. The item ones is really the most obvious one, because you can just press tab and see what's going on. But another example that I forgot to mention was the flash. Let's say you're against an Annie, you have a siege comp against an Annie. Well, a good power spike for you to siege is going to be when that Annie doesn't have flash. So you can group up and take take the initiative and start forcing down towers until the Annie flash comes back up, where it can be a little bit more dangerous to find yourself in a clustered up grouping environment. So I hope you guys found this video useful and will use it to your advantage, because it is a really useful topic when it comes down to League. And if you have any ideas for future videos, feel free to let me know what you thought, any videos that you'd like to see in the future. So thank you for watching.